Welcome to the Voices of Homelessness podcast. I'm your host, Donald Whitehead, and the Voices of Homelessness podcast is sponsored by the National Coalition for the Homeless. Tonight, we discuss with two very powerful young women their journey through homelessness. The role of the Voices of Homelessness podcast is to really dig deeper, to really help you understand the challenges and some of the miraculous achievements of those who've gone through the issue of homelessness. You see statistics, you see newspaper articles about people experiencing homelessness, but rarely do you get to see people talk about that experience in an in-depth way. Well, that's our goal today. And we hope that you'll join us. We hope that you'll continue to be a part of the solutions for homelessness through any of the many things that we do at the National Coalition for the Homeless. We hope you might join the Bring America Home Now campaign. It's a campaign structured to address homelessness in a structural way. So we thank you for tuning in. We hope you'll tell a friend about the Voices of Homelessness. And I want to welcome our guests tonight. We have again, two powerful young ladies who will tell you a little bit about the navigating the issue of homelessness from their perspective. We have Elaine Lewis and Adaora Onuora. Thank you both and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And it's nice to have you. And so what we typically do on the podcast is we have you tell us a little bit about how you got to the experience of homelessness, what happened to help move you through it, and where you are today. So let's start out with you, Elaine. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Elaine Lewis, and I experienced homelessness. I don't remember the exact year. I probably should, but it was shortly after a divorce, and I felt like I didn't have any hope. I didn't know how I was going to provide a shelter for my son and I. I didn't feel that I was financially stable enough to manage a home. We had moved out of our apartment and moved in with family members, and that wasn't a sustainable option for us. And so our option was to move into a homeless shelter. And I remember the day clear. It was Christmas Day when we got the call that there was a space available. So we had Christmas dinner with family. And then immediately after dinner, we reported to the shelter. We went through a very extensive check-in process, a very humiliating check-in process, which included a check of my personal body. I was drug tested. I had to wash all of my belongings before we were able to report to our beds, which was well into the midnight hour. My son was very tired, and we got settled in, and we were there for about 3 months. Considering the alternative, it was not a horrible experience. They kept it as clean as possible, but it was a homeless shelter nonetheless. There was a shared space. I guess each mom had one child, and it was a wide open space. We were assigned to one bed for ourselves, one bed for our child, and a storage closet, cabinet for our personal belongings. And like I said, I stayed there for about 3 months and worked very closely with with a counselor who is now the CEO of the organization. But that was the basis of my situation, not really having anywhere to go, and checking in on Christmas night. I will never forget that. It was such a bad night for us, but we were grateful to have shelter.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring story, and really addressing, some of the challenges that people would not expect to hear.
Yeah.
So the one thing that is very consistent between you and Adaora, I'll let you start out with your story. is that, contrary to popular belief, neither of you came to your situation because of drugs or mental health issues or anything like that. So, Adaora, tell us about your story.
I was 16, well, yes, 16 years old when I ended up in foster care. I grew up in a two-parent household, had the morals and values and the house with the white picket fence and a good neighborhood with the good schools. And one day, my mom, after a trip to Nigeria, which is our hometown, my mom fell sick, and that ended up lasting on and off for the next 8 years. And that happened when I was about 7 or 8. And that would actually be the last years that I had with my mom. So she passed when I was 15. And then our father, who happened to not even be in the country at the time of her passing, he came back, and we ended up preparing ourselves to go and bury our mom, because it's tradition that if your blood is Nigerian, you're usually buried at home. So we went to bury her, ended up being left there, and we had to pretty much fend for ourselves, and our mom's side of the family pretty much took us in. So it was kind of a pre-kinship care type of situation where we would go from this aunt's house to this uncle's house to this aunt's house. Granted, my mom had 8 siblings, so at least we were able to piggyback through a lot of siblings before things just got bad. But the sad part was, our father just ended up leaving us there. He wanted us to stay there and go to school after we were already enrolled in school here and things like that. So we just kind of refused. We refused, and he didn't like that. And so we ended up having to go our own way and, just kind of get the embassy involved, because there's one thing our mother did not raise is dumb children. So we knew our rights as American citizens. We reached out to the American embassy. We got in contact with them. This pretty much started like the next 8 to 10 months would be like a lengthy investigation of whether or not we should be able to be allowed to receive passage back to America and things like that, which we eventually did win. As you can see, I'm in America. So we did eventually win that investigation, and there's a lot of events that kind of messed it up. Then we got it back together, but I won't go into that point at this moment. That's a conversation for a different day. But fast forward to us coming into foster care. I spent the last 5 years, I spent from the age of 16 to 21 in foster care, pretty much going from pretty much almost every section of foster care that you could think of, from therapeutic foster care to respites to just regular foster care homes, to I didn't do group homes, but I did do independent living homes, CELA, which is the semi-independent living arrangement sector. And then I eventually, after emancipating and falling into homelessness for like 5 to 6 months, I was able to utilize the FUP voucher, which turned into the FSS voucher. So I have experienced almost every factor of the child welfare system and the housing system that there is to experience. And homelessness is one of them as well. Prior to me even getting the FUP voucher, it was my last year in foster care, and I was like, I'm the type of person who likes to plan ahead for these life-changing types of things, especially considering the last 5 years of my life was just completely, So I started asking my social worker, and I was like, I know there has to be some type of resources that I'm eligible for after foster care. Like, you can't sit here and tell me that there's not. My social worker at the time, I don't think it was that there weren't any resources. I think it was that she didn't know if I'd be able to utilize them by the time of my aging out. And it's because a lot of the policy and laws that were based around vouchers at that time, which was what, 5, 6 years ago, they were pretty much based on a administration, as far as like the presidential administration, whoever's in charge and making those policies. If they want to direct money to vouchers, they can. If they don't and they want to cut it and put it somewhere else, they can do that as well. So it just depended on the time frame that I was aging out. And at that time, it was like it was an inconsistency with what was going on. So it was like the portal to fill out the applications for the FUP voucher, it would like come on and then it would be there for like a week and then it would automatically like shut off. And so stuff like that. So she just didn't, I just don't think she had the heart to kind of tell me something that she thought I may not be able to get, and getting my hopes up and things like that. So I don't fault her for that, but I do fault these policies. I definitely do fault these 30-year-old policies that require youth to fall into homelessness before they're even eligible to receive vouchers. And 3 months before I emancipated, I happened to go to a college fair and I met a young lady who just so happened to be within the same foster care agency that I was in. And it's just so happened that she had just got approved for a FUP voucher because she is 3 months older than me, and it was her time to emancipate from foster care. So when I found that out, I immediately called a meeting with like my social worker and 4 of their supervisors and all of that. So I called them and I was like, okay, well, the cat's out the bag, so you guys might as well just explain it to me. Let me know what's going on. So they explained to me that, it was just a possibility that it wouldn't be open, and it's just something that they would have to tackle closer to my emancipation date so that I would be more likely to get approved. Because if it was so early, they would figure like, why it's so early, they still need time to be in the system and things like that. So, went on about my business, very disappointed because I couldn't get any concrete information. And so the day came and I was out of the system on my birthday, on my 21st birthday. Thankfully, I didn't have to go to a shelter because I have 2 little sisters who are still in foster care. And I'm just so thankful that I happen to be the oldest, because I was able to go through these little situations in each sector of foster care, and they would just follow my footsteps and avoid the problems that I had to face, that I had to advocate for myself to get, those services and resources. So it just so happened that the basement apartment that I was emancipating out of when I was utilizing the SELA agreement, my baby sister came and took my place within that basement apartment, and then my middle sister was already in that apartment. So I just ended up staying with them and just sleeping on their couches or in their beds or wherever I could sleep. And that went on for about 4 months, 4 to 5 months. And that was when I received the call one day. I was at work, guys. I'm not even going to lie to you. I had just clocked in like 2 hours ago, and I received the call from my social worker, and she was saying that the FUP portal had just opened up.
So do it really quick. You used a bunch of acronyms.
Yes. Sorry.
Probably are like, what is she talking about? What does FUP mean? Can you tell me what FUP means?
So FUP means the Family Unification Program, and what it is a voucher that gives you up to 36 months to have subsidized income from the government, and they are able to basically match your payments or what you can pay and pay the rest of your rent. So it's kind of like Section 8, but they call it a housing choice voucher, and it's a form of Section 8 in that program sense.
Awesome. I'm going to let you keep going, but I want to make sure we get
Of course, of course. Oh, and also, because I did use FSS as well. FSS is the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, and it is an expansion of the FUP program, which adds an additional 24 months onto your contract for being in the housing program, and it turns into a pilot program. So they do have some requirements, but they also do have a host of benefits. Like they do require you to either be working or in school and you do have to establish 3 goals that you would like to accomplish within your time in the program, and you do have the ability to build an escrow account where the government matches your dollar for actually doing what you're supposed to do. So if you start off paying $0 as your copay, and next year you graduate from college and you get a 6-figure job, whatever that, well, I won't say 6 figures because there is a cap, guys. So please understand that. So if you're close to the cap though, and you're able to pay like a substantial amount of your rent, like let's say your rent jumps from $0 to $1,000, the government will match your $1,000 and they will put it away in an escrow account for you, so that as long as you complete the goals that you laid out on the first day of you entering the FSS program, you will be granted an escrow check for doing exactly what you were supposed to do, guys.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that wealth of information. You may have guessed by now that Adaora actually is an advocate for those programs.
I am.
Because she just let you know kind of her depth of understanding. And really interesting, the other part that she just explained to you is that, you know, a lot of this information came through her own research, through interactions with other people in the system, and you would be surprised how often that happens. There really isn't like a roadmap for people. People have to self-educate themselves about a very complex system. Now, I know the program and I can follow what Adaora just shared with you, but someone who's younger, who's in the foster care system, who may be terrified by that system, might not be as easily able to follow that path that you just learned. And Elaine, I know a little bit about your story as well. I know though that with you couldn't even use the traditional system. You were actually instructed to kind of go outside of the system because your situation wasn't the normal situation either. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I had a full-time job, a decent salary, and my desire was to land a Section 8 voucher, and Section 8 or transitional housing. And my housing counselor, she kept trying to advise that's not the right route for you. You can afford a market rate apartment. And I was like, no, I can't afford it. And the challenge at that time was I wasn't good with money. I didn't know how to manage my money. I had never been evicted, but I had come very close to it when I was married to my ex-husband. We weren't good with money. And so I was maintaining that mindset that I didn't want to end up back in a homeless shelter. So I thought that transitional housing would be my best option because I'd pay a certain amount, I'd get assistance, I'd have some type of financial counseling and all of those things to try to get me to where I could be a little more stable and self-sufficient. And she really worked with me. She talked to those fears that I had about fear of failure, because I had my child that I had to look out for. If it were just me, I would have bunked on somebody's sofa or found a basement apartment or something, but I wanted him to have, a decent home. And I didn't want us to go into something where I felt that I couldn't handle it and we end up back at that place. And so she talked to me and we sat down and we went over my finances, and she assured me that I would be able to manage, but I also had to become more disciplined with my finances. And so, yes, there are those options, but the options were very, very limited. and even looking for affordable market rate apartments at that time. And even now, it was almost impossible. I went to apartment complexes that had a list of those properties that had certain amount of units for low income residents. And so I was like, well, let me put my name on the list because I had the shelter backing, to support my low income. But the lists were so long, it wasn't even feasible because the shelter, there's a time limit. You can't stay there forever. And, I needed to figure out how I was going to do this. And the list, it was impossible. The amount of properties with low income housing, and then those properties having very long waiting lists. And so I started just looking for a community that I could afford. It wasn't the best community, but it was something that I could afford. And it was I didn't feel safe, but it was ours. It was what we could afford at the time, and we never had any problems. We kept to ourselves and all, so we did good for that year and a half that we were there. But yeah, it was a very really scary situation, especially since I went straight from my parents' home to a husband's home, and I never lived on my own. I never had to manage myself, and now I'm trying to manage myself and a child, and just trying to figure all of these things out. So yeah, that the resources or the access to resources was very, very, very limited. I even tried I don't know, I tried all types of options, and nothing was working out because there were so many hurdles and so many hoops I had to jump through and all those types of things. But I am very grateful that my counselor held my hand through that process and let me know, you can handle this. You got this. You're a big girl. You can handle this. But just trying to navigate through the limited resources and trying to find something that was affordable for my son and I was really challenging.
And that's kind of the other connecting element to your stories. I mean, it sounds like you both had, some pretty strong advocacy. Although Adaora, you said your person didn't know exactly, what to do in the beginning. At least in the end, they came through. And, I would say the same thing in my story. I had some really strong people who cared, but that's not the case all around. And often, that person who is responsible for your well-being, may be having a bad day or a bad month or a bad week, and that comes back to you. Tell me about what, like both of you, what were your biggest barriers? What was the thing that really kind of made it, kind of a hurdle race for you instead of a straight sprint? What were the things that kept you from getting to the place where you wanted to ultimately be? Was it, I won't prescribe anything, but, tell me, we'll start with you, Adaora. What was your biggest hurdle? And then we'll jump back to Elaine, and back and forth. Either you can share, but let me know what that was.
I think my biggest hurdle was the fact that there was no transparency and consistency throughout the information that people had, or the implementation of these procedures or policies. So I think because I think the fact that everybody's case is different, even though we may be trying to attain the same goal, because I think everybody else's need, like what you need might not be, like, for instance, I needed housing, but I was able to manage my money. I'm really good at saving my money. And Elaine needed housing, but she's not good at saving her money. So she needed some financial literacy classes on top of that. So I think what the needs are different, and it's hard to, I guess, deal with all of everybody's differences if there's no consistency in the languaging for the policies that we have to implement these things. If
you
something...
You make an important point, though, and I don't mean to cut you off. Mm-hmm. It is like many different barriers, and they're different for everybody. But we constantly try to use like a cookie cutter model for everybody, and that's why the system has so many failures. And I'm sorry, keep going, Adaora.
Yeah, so being able to look at a program, and no matter what state, county, anything like that, as long as it's in the US of A, and you have this program, you see that every single department, every single program, every single organization implements the same policy, the same rules, everybody gets the same fair chance and things like that. I think that would solve everything, you know. But I think the fact that the government allows states to make their own rules, and then the local communities under the states can make their own rules, and then, you know, at this point it's just in singular people's hands depending on how long their tenure may be in that position. You know, it just becomes chaotic. So then you think about, okay, we have for instance, with me, when I was in foster care, if I had to go to a therapy session or something, and I had to go to a different department, you would think that since the departments are right next to each other, they would just transfer my information, or they've talked about my info. No. So you have to go around telling every single person your story, your problem, what you need. So after a while, you start to get discouraged. The people, they just, at this point, they really are not invested, because they may see you once or twice and they don't even remember you enough, because you have to keep telling them the same thing every single time you see them. So it's just, and like
that's trauma in itself.
It's re-traumatizing that person.
Yeah.
Yes. And Elaine, it sounds like you would agree with that you have to constantly reintroduce yourself to a system that, you know, people in the same system, as Adaora said, maybe they're even next door to each other.
Yes. And the other thing that was a struggle for me was just knowing what to do, where to go, who to talk to, what avenue to take. There's no well, of course you don't want it to be a cookie cutter type situation, but at least within this particular shelter, at least we can all have the same direction. We can all know what our options are, and that just wasn't the case. The access to
you're saying that even not, you know, Adaora talked about needing it at the state level and the city level and at the government level. You're talking about it wasn't even the same in the shelter system.
Because everyone's situation was so completely different. But the instructions were different for each person. Like, I just talking to some of the ladies in the room with me, and they would say, oh, well, I was told to do this. And I was like, they didn't tell me that. They told me to do this. And so it was just, you know, it was just, you were kind of already struggling with life, but then the people that are supposed to be helping you get through this rough time, they weren't helping. I mean, they were helping the best that they could, but they're just the direction on just moving through this to get you to stable housing. There were so many avenues of direction that didn't match, and some of it didn't make sense. So that was the struggle that I had.
And you want to know?
Let me ask you. Go ahead.
Just a quick tidbit to tack on to Elaine's statement. The crazy thing is that they will, the same people that are supposed to help you, it's like they're a step away from being right where you are. So it's like, and then it's like, funding and things like that. They don't, sometimes the government does not give these shelters enough resources or information or training to, give these people. And then it's like the people that you're talking to, you're trying to beg for help. The saddest thing is that half of those people are probably going through the same thing you're going through. And they're literally one paycheck away from being right where you are.
I was working every day. I had a very good paying job, but my ends were just not meeting. And not only because I was not managing my money well, but just the cost of market rate housing was so expensive. That was the
Well,
fear. And I can imagine some of the caseworkers that were there to help us, they were, like you were saying, Adaora, they were probably like looking at my situations like, this looks very familiar.
and without help, who knows what would have happened to either of you.
Mm-hmm.
I just came back from Skid Row, and the thing that really like hit me in a way that I don't know if I've ever been affected before was the number of women that were literally living in a tent on the street, and how unsafe that has to be. So if you think about it, you're like right there on the sidewalk with no locked door in front of you, and you can't even leave that space because everything you have will be gone by the time you get back. So if you think about like that situation, but I wanted to kind of ask you this question and see how you react to what the general public sometimes thinks, and not everybody, of course, in the general public, but some people would say to both of you that it was your fault. And what I hear from you is that circumstances were at fault and not you as an individual. But what would you say to those people that say that, it's your fault, you did something wrong, you made some mistakes, that's why you're homeless, society doesn't have any responsibility for that? What would you guys say to that person?
I would say that over 50% of the country lives at the poverty line. Over 50% of the country is 1 to 2 missed paychecks away from being evicted. Over 50% of the population, in order to live, spend over 50% of their income every month. Okay.
Which eventually you can't keep up. You
can't, because if you're paying 50% of your income just for rent, we haven't spoke about utilities. We haven't spoke about cars to get around to
medical
work.
expenses.
We haven't spoke about medical expenses. We haven't talked about kids. We haven't talked about schooling, clothes, shoes, toiletries, toilet paper. All of these things are expensive. And I feel like the people who make comments like these have never been on the other side of the road. Mm-hmm. And usually well-rounded people that have seen both walks of life understand that it's not always your fault that you're in a messed up situation. And
most of the time it's not your fault.
Most of the time it's not your fault. Mm-hmm. Despite what society may like to, display on TV and social media and things like that, most of the time it is not your fault. The person whose fault it is a crippling economy with astronomical market rates and inflation that's rising as we speak. And
yes, it is
down at all. I mean, just take a look at the minimum wage that hasn't changed since 2009. How many people do you think can live off $7.25 being the federal minimum wage? Some people still get paid that much and are expected to pay today's market rates for apartments. I mean, they're asking for 3 months up front. Just in regular areas like Maryland or DC or something like that. If you go to New York, they require you to make $140K before you're even eligible for a 1-bedroom apartment, guys. So yes, for those that are saying that it's my fault or Elaine's fault or anybody like us fault, I would say that you should do a little bit more research.
Thank you. Elaine?
I will say I take ownership in my lack of judgment with my spending, my inappropriate spending and all. But beyond that, just finding affordable housing was very challenging. And no, that was definitely not my fault. I would want to. Who wants to be homeless? Who wants to be living in a shelter? Everyone wants a safe place to call their own. So why would people inflict themselves in this situation and, submit themselves to going through all of that. No, that's not the desire, but it happens. It's not powerful.
And I always tell people, I've been doing this work for almost 30 years at this point. I've never had any person tell me that they wanted to be homeless or that would refuse an apartment. Now, I have had people refuse to go into a shelter. Adaora, you didn't go into a shelter at all. You did programs.
No, I didn't. Thankfully, I was able to stay with my sisters while I was transitioning.
And so, you both had to guide other people. Adaora, your sisters, Elaine, your child. What was that like? What was it like? You talked to it a little bit, Elaine. You talked about, some of the choices you made, you had to make because you had another life that you were responsible for at the time. And what was it like having people and Adaora, your sisters, depended on you? What was it like with having that additional responsibility as you navigated through this experience that we call homelessness?
Yeah, even before my divorce, my ex-husband and I, we weren't making, at that time, we weren't making a lot of money. Fortunately, as I moved forward through the years, I did start making a little more, but we weren't making a lot of money. And I remember times where I would have to pick up my son and we would have to sit in Safeway to wait for my ex-husband to come and pick us up so we could go home from work. I was on public transportation, and there were times where I would go, and at that time I think you could get 4 bags of potato chips for $1. I didn't even have enough money to get my child a bag of potato chips. Or if I had enough money, I would get something for him, and he'd be like, "Well, mommy, what are you going to eat?" Okay, we're just having a good time at Safeway, waiting for daddy to come, and it was hard. And then, not too long after that, we decided to divorce, and just having this person, if it was just me, I would have been okay figuring life out. But when you have this child, this innocent child that's depending on you for every single thing, every meal, every ride, medical care, everything that he needs, I'm responsible for it. And so trying to make sure that I position myself to not get back in that place, that was very stressful. It was hard. There were times at night I would just lay there like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? How am I going to figure this out? What can I do to get away from this situation? And he was so brave. My son was so amazing. I think at that time he was 9 years old. No, he was 7. And he was like, "Mommy, we're going to be okay. It's okay." And all the little kids were playing and some of them were getting in trouble. And he was like, "I'm going to sit here because I don't want us to get in trouble." And I'm like, he shouldn't have been burdened with that, with even thinking about something like that. At that time, he should have been free to go in his room and play with his toys and all of that kind of stuff. And so it was just so hard, just dealing with having the responsibility of this innocent child, to get him out of that situation and not having the help that I needed, the access to resources. Once you get me to the resource, I'm gonna figure it out. It's just, where is it? Who do I call? Where do I go? I don't know what to do in this situation. And so just if it were a little bit easier having access to the resources, I think that would have made our time there a little bit easier. But it was just frustrating not knowing where to go. But I'm so grateful for my counselor. And we've talked, Donald, about the counselor, how awesome she was, amazing. She gave me everything that she could. Her hands at certain points were tied, but she gave me everything that she could. And I was very grateful for it. I don't think my outcome would have been as successful had it not been for all of the help that she gave me. But my heart ached for those that didn't have even just a regular job, a McDonald's job or something. Some of the ladies didn't even have that. So I'm grateful that I had a little bit of funding to kind of back my venture through the process, but my heart goes out to those women that don't have the finances and they still have the same responsibility that I had, these innocent children that they have to care for.
And the way your stories are different is that And this is something that I think people don't recognize. The foster care system is in place because people don't have someone in their family they can depend on at the time. And while you had the opportunity to kind of stay with relatives, that always comes to end point. So people either have to move on, they're forced to move on because they're in subsidized housing themselves, or something to that effect. When you're a child aging out of foster care, you're basically alone. So you leave a world of a young adult and you're thrust into an adult world without anything to fall back on. And that has to be overwhelming. And my hat's off to you, Adaora, and other people like yourself who, do kind of thrive even in spite of all of that. But the other thing that's interesting to me that does connect your story, according to HUD, neither one of you was homeless or should have been considered homeless by the definition, because you were staying with family and friends.
And that's
in
the
HUD's
problem.
world,
That's part
you're
of
not
it.
homeless. Yeah. So, that just like, it rings loud to me like a church bell that like, someone allowed you guys to be able to get into programs that the federal government in some places says you're not even eligible for. And what if we had a system that would have been there for you before you got to the shelter or before you had to sleep with your relatives? What if there was some prevention in place? And I think those are where the big gaps are in the system. But Adaora, I want both of you, because we're getting close to time. We've talked about the issue, we talked about how you got there, but I want people to know, because people think that like, we've spent too much time talking about people being chronically homeless. So people kind of think this is some long-term situation, and that label that you have, it's kind of permanent. You're going to be in a situation where you have to depend on other people for a long time. But neither one of your stories has an ending like that. You're doing remarkable things in the community. You're taking charge. You're business owners, all of that stuff. So talk about a little bit about that stuff.
So I guess I'll go first. I will say that my life is.
You helped pass legislation.
I did. I did help pass the FYI initiative, which is the Fostering Youth to Independence initiative. It is basically turning the FUP and FSS program into an on-demand voucher, instead of waiting to see if different presidential administrations or different position holders are going to change the policies. So yes, I did. In addition to that, I've been doing other things. I did end up going to school. I graduated with 2 bachelor's degrees. I am currently working as a policy analyst for the National Coalition of the Homeless. I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of youth advocation, just anything that I can do to further the discussion, and also to help bridge the gap of homelessness, and just those that could avoid going through it, and for those that are going through it to be able to get out of it and to get those resources that they need to get out of it. That is what my life's mission, I think, is. I haven't been happy in anything else. I honestly, for the past 5 years, I think this is the, other than me working with the National Center for Housing and Child Welfare, I don't think that any other job that I've held I was happy in. I don't think I've stayed anywhere for longer than 6 months. It didn't feed my soul like advocating and making sure that there's a change for those that are coming after me. and that's what I'm here for. So yes, it's been a great journey. I of course I am not homeless anymore. I have been living in the same space for 6 years now. My next goal is home ownership. I have 2 businesses. I do that. One of them is with my sister, so we definitely, love to keep it in the family. I'm just blessed. I'm blessed, and I want to be a blessing to others.
Well, I was going to say that I think we're blessed to have it. And the young people out there that may be going through trials and tribulations and give up or choose the wrong path, they need to listen to your example.
Yes, I want you guys to know that hard work, it does pay off. And honestly, working smart as well beats working hard. So continue to be a lifelong learner, to continue to put yourself around people that are going to help you advance. You are the average of the 5 people that you're around. So I would say network, and read, learn, and just keep your head up. Please be strong. Please understand that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You will not always be in this situation forever, but in the words of the great Steve Harvey, if you've been through hell and back, why would you stay in hell? You have to keep going.
Okay, so that's a first for our show, a Steve Harvey quote, but I like it. It was great. Thank you so much for that. Elaine, let's hear what Elaine is doing now. Like, I'm gonna brag on you a little bit too, Elaine. Elaine just got the sing at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And we would put you on the spot, but I don't think that's fair. But you were able to do that. But tell us what else you're doing.
Yes, I was so excited to sing at this year's Secretary's Award ceremony. I sang the national anthem, and I was so honored to be invited to do that. At the end of 2001, I did become a homeowner. I'm so proud of myself for that. There are so many first-time homeowner programs out there, Adaora, so we can connect. I know a few.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I am currently in my senior year working on my bachelor's degree in human resources management. I am a federal contractor. I have been for quite some time now. I am a technical assistant with the National Coalition for Homelessness, as well as an executive assistant there. I'm doing so many things. My hands are constantly moving, and I am working towards some sort of advocacy to assist women with employment and transportation. That was one of the struggles that was happening when I was in the shelter. There were no resources for employment, and then once those ladies did have opportunities for employment, they didn't have transportation to get to work. So my goal is to find ways to help women become employed and then have access to transportation, so that safe transportation, so that they can get back and forth to work. But yes, I've worked very closely with Ms. Rashida Jameson at the shelter, Shepherd's Cove and UCAP, United Communities Against Poverty. And I was on House Hunters, the television show House Hunters, and Ms. Jameson was a part of that experience with me as my former counselor and now the CEO of the organization. And so I've been doing a lot, and I have capacity for so much more. And so I'm just excited about where things are happening. I knew after leaving the shelter that I wanted to give back in some kind of way. I didn't realize that this path in my life was taking me down the road. So even my connection to the National Coalition for Homelessness through Miss Michelle Sproul, I'm just so grateful for that connection. We never thought that it would get me to this point. I was just coming to help Donald with his schedule, and here I am. So I'm just so grateful even for her connection, and then being in this place to kind of get my feet wet in advocacy and move forward into the area where I know that I have a passion for these women, and being able to have gainful employment to be able to take care of their babies, and then get back and forth to work, get back and forth to daycare, and all of those types of things. So I'm grateful for this opportunity just to speak.
Awesome. Well, I thank both of you. I mean, this is one of my favorite ever podcasts. Usually I'm pushing people to say a little bit more, but you guys just really brought it tonight. I thank you for giving back, because one of the challenges we have with overcoming this issue is people go through it and they get away as far as they can. They don't want anything to do with the issue of homelessness or people who've experienced homelessness, but not you two. And you've given back in so profound a way, your own way, but you're giving back in ways that really will resonate through this particular issue for many, many years. And I thank you both. For those of you out there that are going through it now, my favorite quote, and I don't know who gave it to me, but I remember hearing this one time. What they said to me is what this particular episode actually brings out in a very loud and powerful way. What it says is, don't let your situation be your destiny. Your destiny is so much greater than that. We will go through things, we will have our ups and our downs, but as long as we keep fighting, we keep working, we keep educating ourselves, we can make a difference in this world. So don't get discouraged, because discouragement is only a setback. It can't be the thing that keeps us in the place that we are. So I thank you both. Really grateful for what you're doing. Really grateful for you sharing so openly and honestly about your experiences. And for those of you out there, these stories that you're hearing are just so powerful. These are the same kind of people that help African Americans get out of slavery and get through civil rights. It wasn't professional speakers, it was laborers, it was people, just ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And keep listening so you can continue to hear ordinary people overcoming barriers and doing extraordinary things. Thank you for listening to Voices of Homelessness. You can hear the podcast on YouTube. Go to our website, www.nationalhomeless.org. And please enjoy yourselves, take care of yourselves, and take care of the other people. Have a great evening.